Hey everybody, welcome to this outdoor, I guess you could say, edition of Sonic Comic News. I don't know if you guys can see me or not, but hopefully you can. If not, I apologize. But anyway, let's talk about what's been going on recently with the Sonic the Hedgehog comic book by Archie Comics. Haven't done Sonic Comic News, as you know, for quite some time, as far as I know. The last time I talked about it, I think, was mainly about 225, the two covers. But there's a lot more been going on lately with the comic than we thought. For example, one of the big news stories that has been going on for the past 6 to 7, 8 months, since basically the summer of last year, was reinvigorated back in November, and that's the whole Ken Penders Archie Comics lawsuit. Now both sides are telling different stories recently in these recent developments. Ken Penders basically saying that there was no agreement ever signed between him and Archie Comics, and given his own side of the story, I will provide a link to it here in the description box. You can read it for yourself. Well, Mike Perithro and Archie Comics say otherwise. Now, Ken does say to other artists out there, like Scott Shaw and a few others that worked at the same time he did, that didn't sign any agreements, and if they did turn them in and all that, but nothing to the effect to where they would lose, I guess, their artwork or any of their properties. So, apparently, it's Ken Penders' side of things, and also one of the big news stories coming out of that is the fact that Ken Penders wants to move the court deal here, well, basically the news coming out is Ken Penders' lawyer wants to dismiss the jurisdiction, or whatever it is. Again, I'll provide the link down below, you can read it for yourself, but wants to dismiss it because he feels that since Ken Penders now lives here in California, that it's a bit unfair that the jurisdiction is in New York for this case, and yet Ken Penders can't be there in person, and that financially he can't afford to go, because he only, I guess according to Ken, he only has like $500 to his name or something. I don't know, and he's living off unemployment checks. So that's one side, and Archie Comics, their representatives are saying, hey, you know, everything that happened with Ken Penders working on the book happened while he was here in New York, you know, so this is where it's legally binding. This is where the court case needs to legally be. So again, I'll provide the link below, but it sounds like it's kind of a back and forth deal. Again, somebody said, that reported this, that, you know, if somehow Ken Penders does become sort of a victorious in some way, gets some kind of a win here, or gets a W in the win column when it comes to this court situation, which I guess will some kind of decision, I guess, is going to be made in June, on June 7th. But according to this person, that if Ken Penders somehow comes through this, somehow gets like a victory of some sorts, that Sega, who's a partner with Archie Comics when it comes to this comic book, and who's approved some if not most of Ken Penders' artwork and stories and all that, that Sega, according to this person that reported this, may be exposed a lot more than people think. Might be largely exposed for some. We don't know. So apparently there's sort of a back and forth deal. So we don't know what's going to happen. The decision will be made. Some kind of decision will be made on June 7th. But right now, the main story coming out of it is the representatives on Ken Penders' side want to dismiss the jurisdiction in New York and have the court case moved here to California. So we'll see what happens. So according to one fan that saw this in the top one of the message boards, said this sounds like just the fact that Ken Penders doesn't have that much money and he's just doing this so he can get more money. We don't know. Now, speaking of the Sonic comic, the cover for 226 recently came out, and Apparently, it's a very reminiscent. I talked about this in a previous video and in my opinions video. It looks very reminiscent of the Sonic the Hedgehog game, the original Sonic the Hedgehog game #1 from the Genesis. And the description saying it's an all new beginning. Sonic has to rescue some woodland creatures, or forest creatures, from being put into badniks and all that. So we don't really know what's going on there, folks. We really don't. I mean, this is throwing a lot of people off, and this is part of the Genesis storyline. The other development, the other news development coming out of this is words going around that originally, I guess, the four-part Genesis, well, it probably is going to be 4 parts, but the rest of the story arc that takes place after this is going to be running for another 2 years. So in other words, according to speculation, fans may have up till issue 250 to deal with this story arc. That's the speculation. Now, unless Ian Flynn, who apparently is trying to throw red herrings out on his message board, is just saying that, like to say, to throw people off and get them talking, which he's gotten me and everybody else doing, then he's done a good job. But, you know, we don't know just yet, even though the artist and even Ian Flynn himself have all confirmed that characters like the Freedom Fighters, like Rotor and Antoine and Sally and Bunny, are all going to be fine, and confirmed for the Genesis storyline. We still don't know what's going to happen. So right now, the situation with this whole Genesis storyline is that we're being thrown, is us, the fans and subscribers and readers, are being thrown red herrings. So we don't really know what's going to happen. You know, that's the situation going on there, as far as we know. Those are the red herrings going on there. With the Sonic the Hedgehog main comic book, as far as the Genesis storyline or story arc goes, starting up this summer, these red herrings are being thrown out by Ian and I guess some other people to kind of throw us off and make us think and forget about what they said previously. So we'll see what happens. Now, speaking of Ian Flynn, as everybody knows, Sonic Universe's 25th anniversary issue came out last month, in I think February, January, something around that point. It came out around that time. Now, a lot of people were speculating exactly what the Silver everybody was speculating what the Silver Story arc, which began, like I said, in issue 25, the 25th issue of Sonic Universe, was going to be about. Well, apparently, if you read the preview pages and read between the preview pages and the preview descriptions, apparently the Silver Story arc, which is called Through the Looking Glass, is loosely based, and I mean loosely, and I say that like this, loosely based on Ian Flynn's Other-M Webcomic. Now, if you don't know what Other-M is, it was a webcomic that Ian Flynn did years before he joined up with Archie Comics as a ghost writer, and now it's head writer. So that's what Other-M is. That was basically his webcomic, and it was a lot darker, a lot more violent than your average comic. So there had to be, so everybody was always speculating from the day that Ian came on board if he was ever going to imply or, you know, kind of insert his story in some way. Everybody was always wondering, was he going to insert his story in some way? And apparently he's found a way, and that is through the Silver's story arc in Sonic Universe. He's found a way to insert and implant his story, or a loosely based adaptation of his story, into the Sonic Universe comic book. Now, Ian Flynn apparently has no problem with people talking about it on his website or other sites, but when I guess people ask him, he just really doesn't feel comfortable talking about it. I don't know why, because apparently, according to a lot of fans, and as we have seen in many previews, he's actually inserting and loosely basing the Silver Story arc in the Sonic Universe comic book on his webcomic. So we'll see exactly what will happen. I mean, like I said, it's loosely based on it in some way. That's all I can say. I mean, you got the character designs almost matching exactly to what he did in his webcomic. So we'll see what happens. I don't know if maybe he was waiting for the opportunity to do this. Maybe he found out, along with all the other writers and comic book artists and everything in Archie, that they were going to drop the code, and maybe found that out a year or so ago and said, hey, you know what? This would be a perfect opportunity to finally do a loosely based comic adaptation on Other-M. Because I think as long as they had that comic book code on them, I don't think he could have done it. But now that it's gone, I think now he's looking at it like, opportunity knocks. So we'll see. But that's the one thing that's going on, because if you read the descriptions, you look at the preview pages, everything looks very similar. But we don't know about the rest. See, the only things that are different is the fact that the villain is not Knuckles, it's Urajek. Now, some people don't know if it's Knuckles as Urajek. Nobody knows. The other difference is the Palit, or I think that's what they call the Palit, is not an evil version of the Chaotix, but more of a robotic version of the Chaotix. And the other difference is you have Urajek taking, or the villain, the main villain, extracting souls out of all the characters. So we'll see what happens, and apparently it sounds like Ian Flynn may be combining, or his Other-M webcomic is maybe combining this loosely adapted Other-M comic and combining it with the storyline of Lala Sue's and Julie Sue's alternate timeline where Knuckles is the bad guy. So that might be tied together, and this, like I say, this might be tied together in what is being known, as far as I look at it, is a loosely based adaptation of Other-M. So, I mean, that is the news facts coming out. I mean, that is the news right there. The fact that Ian Flynn, according to many fans, is doing a loosely based adaptation of Other-M in the Silver Story arc in Sonic Universe. And the fact that the reason I say it's loosely based is because, like I said, he's combining obviously the elements of the alternate timeline where Lala Sue and Julie Sue work alongside them to stop Urajek, or Knuckles, if it is Knuckles, from, you know, ruining any more lives, from extracting any more souls. So, you know, that is the news. So that basically is the news coming out of Sonic Universe. Now, as far as, like I said, the Sonic the Hedgehog main comic book goes, all I know is that this past month, we recently in 222, I guess we had Sonic and Sally get back together, which was confirmed in the preview pages for the free Comic Book Day issue of Sonic the Hedgehog. Next month we're going to have the start of a two-part prelude into the Genesis story arc, into 225, as well as this Genesis story arc, with Sonic and Sally facing off against Naugus and Jeffrey St. John. So apparently that's what's going on in the comic book world of Sonic the Hedgehog. I mean, big news, I guess you could consider it. I mean, we have an artist loosely adapting his webcomic into the spin-off comic, and as well as we have the cover for 226 being very reminiscing of the first Sonic the Hedgehog game on Genesis, and basically by having that, it's throwing people off. Basically, in other words, this is probably the biggest red herring that anybody could throw at anybody. So, but that's the news. That's the news of the Sonic the Hedgehog comic book by Archie Comics as of right now. And as far, like I said, we have the cover of 226, which is throwing people off. We have Other-M, the webcomic by Ian Flynn, being loosely adapted into the Silver Story arc. As well as, again, you'll see the link down below, the situation with Kim Penders and Archie Comics, new details coming out of that. So, that's all I'm going to say. Tell me what you guys think. Comment down below. Talk to you all later.